Hi Zach, how you doing?
Good. How's life for you?
Life is good. I'm vertical, breathing oxygen, so that's always where I start.
Absolutely. This is the new world we live in, right?
Well, if you don't have those two, you don't have anything else. So it's kind of the most important part to the conversation, right?
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this, Frank. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Frank, were you born in Calgary?
No, I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and my family, my mother and father, Frank and Elena, were first generation immigrants that came in the European wave of immigrants after World War II in the mid 50s. And my dad landed in New York. My mom landed in the Port of Halifax, and they both met in Montreal and got married, and we ended up in Winnipeg. So, which is also the name of my company is the street I grew up on, which is Arlington Street in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Okay. And did you grow up in a middle class family, or in your upbringing, was it very different than than how most individuals were raised? Because first generation immigrants.
Well, if you Googled Arlington Street I don't want to date myself, but I am at the apex of my life. If you Googled Arlington Street in the 70s, you would Google two things about it. Number one, it was the location and destination for first generation European immigrants who really were the backbone of building this country. And so, it was really a working class Italian, Portuguese, Greek, German enclave of immigrants, and they were all really blue collar workers. I mean, the story of my father is the classic immigrant story. He was a accountant, and he had an amazing backstory when he was in Italy. But he was an accountant, couldn't speak English. That sounds pretty familiar to most immigrants who come to Canada. And he couldn't get a job as an accountant, so he got a welder's ticket, and he ended up getting a job with a company called West Steel Roscoe, which was a company where if you drive up the number one highway through Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and you see these big grain silos on the top, it'll say West Steel Roscoe. They were the only company who built grain silos back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Oh. And so that's how we ended up in Winnipeg. But no, Winnipeg was a first generation, hardworking, blue collar area. And then it turned into, about 10 years later, the murder capital of Canada for almost a decade, really from the early 70s the mid to late 70s to the mid to late 80s. And we don't have enough time to talk about why that happened and what culturally changed in the area. But I always tell people, if you want to know who I am and where I came from, figure out where Arlington Street is and what it was all about, and you can get a sense of where I started. And where I am today is very different.
Yeah. And what brought you down to Calgary? Was it mom or dad's work?
No, not at all. My dad died when I was 3. And my mom did what every other immigrant mother would do when you're a single mother bringing up 4 kids. She worked 12 to 14 hours a day. She originally cleaned houses. And that's how I got babysat. I followed her when she was cleaning houses, and I sat on a couch and didn't say a word while she was cleaning houses when I grew up. And I saw everything I needed to see about what was going to lead me to where I am today, which is life of an entrepreneur. And it didn't compute when I was 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, but it all makes a lot of sense to me today. And so I connect with immigrants, I connect with hard work, I connect with a quality disposition, and having respect and dignity in the thing that you do. And I don't really care if, someone's mopping a floor or building a large tower downtown. The people that I connect with are the people who respect what they do and leave something behind that was significantly better than when they got there. So no, the answer to your question about how I got to Calgary was I dropped out of law school when I was 25, and I started my first business. And by the time I was 30, that company had about 700 employees. It was located in Winnipeg. I was in the food services business. I got into food service because I grew up in an Italian restaurant. My mom went from cleaning houses to realizing there's two Italian guys in Winnipeg, Luciano and Carmen. It's going to sound like a West Side Story. It's probably going to be a movie one day, I'm sure. And they said, Elena, which is what my mom's name was, you know how to cook. And she said, yeah. And she said, well, they said, well, look, we saved $25,000. We want to start a restaurant called Vesuvio in Winnipeg. And so she started in that restaurant, grew that restaurant to seat 140 people. Our family grew up in there. I was cleaning floors when I was 10. I was serving drinks. Probably shouldn't record this, but anyways, when I was 14. And that's when I wasn't playing sports. And so, so that's kind of how we grew up, and then started the company till in 2000, I realized that we were getting 80% of our revenue outside of Winnipeg. And because I'm a business development guy, I needed to be in front of our clients. And so we had offices in Vancouver, and we were looking at opening up in Alberta, and we had one in Toronto. And of course, our head office in Winnipeg. And so I just loved Calgary, and I just thought it was an amazing place. So I decided to move our head office there, and I relocated in 2000.
Wow. When you look back at your life, what was some of the values that or lessons learned from your mother that you apply today?
Well, the hardest lesson for me to learn, because it wasn't delivered nicely, whatever that means, but I think people know what it feels like in this kind of woke generation of, right and wrong, and what you can say and what you can't say, and, how people can communicate. My mom had what I refer to as a no excuse disposition. She never made excuses about her life. When my dad died, she just started working, and she didn't just start working. She worked 12 hours a day. And I'm not suggesting to you in any way, shape, or form she was giving me Tony Robbins mentorship classes when she was done her 12 hours worth of work. But what I witnessed was a woman, first of all, who couldn't speak English, who basically just did everything she needed to do, and just kind of went at it. And, that really created a life of dignity. My mom, when we buried her when I was 35 years old, and I gave her eulogy in Winnipeg, there was 850 people who came to her funeral. This is an immigrant woman who had nothing, who was a chef at a restaurant. So how do you get that equation with 850 people? I know business people who can't put 400 people into a church when they go away. And this is a little bit about, I'm sure, what you want to talk about, which is the end, the what, not the how. And so, I just witnessed that. And look, here's the hard part, right? I'm this big, aggressive Italian guy who happens to be in real estate and builds a bunch of businesses. I don't hold a candle to my mother. And I have this intense relationship and respect for women. And so, one of the things in our culture today, like I never thought about hiring, a male or a female. I never thought about hiring an Italian or an Indian. I never thought about that. I just kind of was like, it's about meritocracy. Do you have the intestinal fortitude to work in an ambitious organization like mine? Number one. Number two, the table stake is, if I'm hiring you to paint a wall, for example, I have to know that you've done a great job painting walls for the past 10, 15 years. And then the last piece is really kind of connecting with, what their vision is to what my vision is, and seeing if we can get aligned and move it forward. So we have an ambitious company, and that came from my mom. My mom was wealthier when she passed away than many, many, many Canadians who made 10 times more money than she did. Now, I would say to you, to be fair about that comment, my mom just starved herself for any gratification. So she didn't buy new clothes. We didn't have a car my entire life. She had a bus pass. That's how we got around, right? When we started getting older, we drove my mom everywhere. So, she sacrificed, and that was her thing. And so, people see me work on Saturdays and Sundays and they think, wow, this guy's like gained a level of success. What's going on there? There's this engine, there's this story going on in the back of my mind 24/7. And I'm just an immigrant kid who grew up in Winnipeg with nothing. And that experience propels me today. And it pushes me on every conversation I have with everybody that we talk to in business.
2 years ago, well, this year is going to be 3 years, my mom passed away in my 30s. And yeah, it changes everything, doesn't it, for you as a human being? Your mind shifts and that was your safety net. And I'm sure that was for you as well at one point in time. Your mom was everything, right? But how we live, how we move forward in grace in their respected ways, we kind of realize, oh my God, what mom said then, I finally get it now. She used to get mad, or she was sometimes a little tough on us, but I think we finally get it as we grow older.
Well, parents, are you a parent,
I'm not a parent yet.
So, you're gonna get there and you're gonna be blown away subconsciously how your values your mom taught you show up and how you take care of your kids. And by the way, it's got a duality. I mean, my mom was very, very tough. And I would say, like, coming from me, and she was a bit rough. She just was so maniacally focused on getting stuff done and results and living in a no excuse environment. And it's funny. I was watching, I don't know, and we're not talking about him, we're talking about me and you right now, but The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. Yes. There are very few high-level leaders that in some way, shape, or form don't resemble sometimes in their lives like tyrants. And people view them as tyrants because they just can't understand why they just drive so hard, and they can't accept anything but perfection. And just if we got to work out for 2 hours 3 times a day, let's work out for another half an hour 3 times a day. And then we'll have an hour and a half per day that we can add up over 12 months. And we have all this additional, benefit because we put more time into it and we put more energy into it and we sacrifice more. And I will tell you, there's a big risk in today's society because of what's happening in the online world. The equation of time and result has kind of gone away because we got overnight cryptocurrency billionaires and we got, online influencers, present company not excluded, who show up and I don't know, the Kim Kardashian culture. I was reading The Economist, and there's actually a title for people who are online who absolutely create zero positive benefit to the culture. There's an actual category for those people who've made hundreds of millions of dollars because people are dialing into them, and that's the big risk today. One of the several risks, but that's one of the big risks for the next generation that's up and coming, with this kind of, this work ethic or this input-output equation. So anyways, you didn't ask me that question. We'll go back to your questions, not my opinions.
No, I appreciate that. No, that's true. I feel like a lot of those conversations can come off air instead of on air, right?
Well, I think, there's a whole series of conversations you can have with people. And look, I don't talk to people my age when I'm looking for advice. I talk to everybody, but the people who I really talk to are the guys who are 70 and 80 years old, who I've had the great gift to know and respect and get to know over the years, who knew me when I was 25, 26, saying, here's some things I want to do. And they thought I was crazy. And they took a flyer on me, and it all worked out well. But there's some pretty sage wisdom out there. I'm not sure a lot of people are listening to it.
What do you think it is? Is it ego? Is it people just saying, I'm right, leave me alone? I'm always seeking advice from others, and everybody's got a story. Hence why we're doing this is, it grounds you, it humbles you to realize you're not alone in a lot of the struggles. A lot of people can see the success, but they don't know the layers of how to get there. And I think that's a beautiful experience and a journey, the failures and the successes. Yeah.
Well, the problem with that word is you got to quantify it first. Most people who get into entrepreneurship or want to be business people, they talk about success in a very unidimensional way. It's about money. It's about, I want to make more money. And up and until the point that they actually get into the risk equation and the sacrifice equation of getting that money, they have no clue what an entrepreneur does. And it started with the bastardization of entrepreneurship with Donald Trump when he was when he came out and what was his program? The Apprentice.
The Apprentice, yeah.
That's all Hollywood entrepreneurship. And quite frankly, even when people dial into watching the Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, if you actually talk to the people, and I know several of the people who sit on those panels, it's a bit, people look at it and they think, oh, well, that's entrepreneurship. And wow, it looks so easy. And they just pitch these guys and here's 2 or 3 things they needed to know. No. That's not how entrepreneurship works. And so there's a lot of data out there that's false. There's a lot of data out there that isn't actually telling the story. And here's the other problem, right? Which is kind of like at the baseline of it. I grew up in a meritocracy. If I was playing sports, I became captain because I scored more goals than everybody else. I accelerated better than anyone else. I was on junior national teams and national teams. And no one was asking why I had a C on my jersey. No one asked why I had a huge trophy case in my house full of trophies, because there is a meritocracy there. Today, people get to go online who've relatively speaking done nothing to create a positive benefit or real influence, and they're being compensated for it. And my daughter, I have two daughters, 9 and 11. They're watching this stuff, and we don't let them watch the Kardashians, and we don't let them watch Selling Sunset, because I'm in the real estate business. I'm like, that ain't real. Like, that's not how it works, guys. And so the problem is that I don't think it's about them not listening. They're listening to everything. And most of it's bad, right? Like most of what people are listening to is bad. Like it's BS. It doesn't live in the realm of reality. And no one's really, I think there's very few conduits where people are willing to talk about the mud, the blood, and the flood, and what it actually takes to be successful as an entrepreneur. The rest of it around, time, influence, and money, that's the secret triangle, right? That's what everyone thinks. If I become an entrepreneur, I'll make more money, which means I'll get more time, which means I'll be able to influence more people. Well, that's BS. And what people are starting to realize is that you actually have to get on top of the triangle, and you got to talk about this word called freedom. And freedom is really the goal that every entrepreneur should look for. It ain't about making more money, because when you get more money, trust me, you are not going to get more time. You're going to have less time. You may get more influence, but it may be momentary, because if the market corrects against you, you go from hero to zero very quickly. Okay. And so really the equation has to be freedom. And before entrepreneurs get in, I tell us every time I'm talking to people about business, you better figure out what freedom looks like. Because if you don't, you're going to blow some things up along the way that you're going to have regrets for. I did. Everyone does that, I know, because you didn't think about it. So there's a different level of conversation around this idea of success.
Yeah. Do you think entrepreneurship is nature or nurture? Is it in our DNA to say that's an entrepreneur, or do you have to go to school? Like many people go to school for entrepreneurship. I think it's a tough one, isn't it?
Well, listen, I'm a recovering Catholic, so I still believe in the big guy above me, in absolute terms. I think you can sociologically create any result if you're committed to doing it over a long period of time. And as it relates to kids, I'm always thinking about the words that come out of my mouth with my kids, always. I'm always thinking about when they have a bad practice at soccer, or they have a bad swim meet, or they have, like, what am I saying to them? How am I setting them up for success? What's the lesson to be learned? And I don't do participation awards.
No.
And that's another risk that we have in our culture today, is that we give kids participation awards, because that's not the world they're gonna grow up in, and we're setting them up for failure when we give them participation awards. So I would say to you that, and I'm gonna answer your question in this way. My girls do things that ain't got anything to do with how I've socialized them or my wife socialized them. There's stuff that's coming out of their mouths and their brains and their central nervous system that was hardwired 1,000 years ago. I truly believe that. And I know that because I've done enough work on myself to know that there's a bunch of things that, I always show up in the world in a certain way. And I'm realizing, I'm like, wow, that actually has nothing to do with what I was taught when I was a kid. There's something going on a long time ago. So I think it's both. But I would say to you that, I know it's both. I believe it's both, I should say. But I also know that anything that can be learned can be unlearned. So, and that's good or bad. So I think that the environmental influence is really significant in that whole equation.
No, for sure. When you when you talk about freedom, is it time that we're all chasing as entrepreneurs or just as individuals, or is it something else? Because we can chase freedom, but as an entrepreneur, you'll find in that time, hey, let me look at a new property. Let me find something else to invest in, and all these other things. When is it enough? And it's not, like you said, it's never about the money. It's about the excitement, and it's just how you're wired.
Yeah, I would look at it a different way. When I think about the question you ask, there's only one word I think about, and it's energy. Mm-hmm. So to me, success is about energy. In whatever endeavor I'm doing at any given time, is it giving me energy or is it taking energy away? Business, and so in my life, what I'm trying to do in my life today is take all this complexity, because I got a lot of complexity, and try to disseminate it down to like one sentence or one word, ideally. So business, right? Asset, liability, energy, positive energy that gives me more energy, negative energy that takes it away. So I would say that anything that I do, I think about, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do another project, I'm going to sign another set of financial agreements, I'm going to go into a different territory. Is it going to give me energy or is it going to take it away? And I think that, I'll put it to you a different way. If you're dating somebody, do they give me energy or do they take it away? Like, how many people screw that one up, right? Like 80%. That's what our divorce rate is, right? Because people get confused by what they think they're getting, but they're actually not getting the thing they really want. So, listen, I'll tell you something. I'll give you a perfect example. I used to be a car guy. Okay. If you came to my office, you'd know that. Because I got a car in my lobby, and that car is in the lobby for one reason. It's that I gave all my cars away because I don't want that energy around me anymore. You know why? Because the cars talk to me. And you know what they say to me? Drive me, please. Drive me as much as you can and as fast as you can. And I have two things in my life today: my company and my family. And I got two girls. And you know what they say to me? Spend time with me, Dad. I need your presence here. So I wanted to get that energy figured out. And I was like, well, I want to put all my energy into my girls, but the cars keep talking every time my garage, because they're on the hoists, and they say, drive me. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? My girls are more important. Sell all the cars. So when I go into the garage, there's nothing in my brain that is talking to me except for my ability to walk into that door and say, I am present now. There is no more noise around someone else asking me for my time, because that's the only commodity I have. Does that make sense?
It does. And I guess you let yourself go from being a slave to those cars, and that's freedom, I guess, in a way, like that disconnect.
100%.
It's not easy.
look, I mean, look, I hang out with the most screwed up people in the world. Like, and I'm one of them. I'm an entrepreneur. Okay. Like you want to hang out with people who are very dysfunctional. Go hang out with entrepreneurs who are achieved high levels of success in business. You know, you're going to see financial bankruptcy. You're going to see physical bankruptcy. You're going to see moral bankruptcy at levels that the average person doesn't experience. Why? Because entrepreneurs push the limit. And when we, excuse the language, blow shit up, we just blow it up bigger than most normal people. That's what we do. So it's really about success is what I feel like in the skin of my own body. Like I wear an Apple Watch that's got a giraffe on it. Like that's what I wear. Okay. My daughter put it on. And you know what? I don't even like, I own a BlackBerry. All right. So I don't know what this thing is like a couple $100. I owned a watch collection. Okay. I couldn't care less about watches anymore. But 10 years ago, I thought it was important. Just like I thought the cars were important. Just like I thought a lot of things were important. They're not. They're just noisy. And what it does is it creates a circumstance where, and because entrepreneurs we're all spending our times fixing things every day.
Yeah.
But the thing we need to fix most or to deal with most is right here. Right? I build a building, I got to make 2 million decisions, and there's going to be 100,000 problems, and I got to solve those problems all the time. And along the way, I don't give myself time to solve some things that are happening in my heart and my head. And then I cause issues with my wife, and then I cause issues with my kids and maybe my friends. And so, you know, that's really the thing I think about, and I protect myself as best as I possibly can around that energy.
Do you think the cars and all of that was milestones for you, or was it a chip of, you know, Italian heritage? I mean, I don't know any Italian that doesn't love cars. So was it, oh my God, the dream of the Ferrari and the prancing horse or the stable? Like, was it the stories of Enzo that sold you of success, you know?
Yeah, there's these icons in life, right? And when you're 5 years old with no money, living at 171 Arlington Street, and, you know, you have a household income that's below the poverty line, you know, thinking about buying your first Porsche 911 Turbo cash, which was my goal my first car, that was my goal. Yeah, it's a milestone. It's a very low level entrepreneurial beginner's way of thinking about success. And look, it took me 50 years to get here. Okay. So I wasn't thinking about this when I was 26. I was like, I'm going to get my first 911 Turbo. I'm going to Vegas on the weekends. I'm going to buy a big house. I'm going to have maybe 3 cars, you know, sure. That's normal stuff, right? It's normal, very normal. I would just say that if it's still normal when you're 50, you probably got some problems.
Fair enough. Yeah. And that's growth, isn't it? That's growth. Yeah.
Hopefully.
When did you realize?
There's a lot of guys who would rather hang out with their cars than their kids, and I'll leave that up to them.
That's true. I know we got to get going soon, but you know, when did you realize that you were going down a different path and this was not going to be good for you at 50, 55, 60, if you were obsessed with vehicles or just your mind was different? When did you realize that I have a problem here?
Well, I recalibrate every week. I'm checking myself every week.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm making 100,000 decisions a month, and I'm going to make mistakes. And so I'm checking myself all the time. Like I make mistakes all the time. I make mistakes with my employees, with my team, with my family. I make mistakes. And so I don't want to disconnect how sage I sound with how perfect I exemplify that wisdom, because I don't. So it really wasn't the cars was a check mark. It was just kind of like, it was a moment in time in my life, you know, and it had to do with a lot of things. Growing up without a dad, being clear what I wanted to be in terms of a dad, like how important these girls were to me, how much they were connecting with me, and how responsible I was for their future. But if you ask me, when I got to my week on Friday last week, I have a 15-minute touch base with myself in my calendar. And I know we're on a podcast. Hopefully this isn't a Christian podcast, but it says, what did I fuck up this week? That's what it says. It literally says that at 3:00 on Friday. And I take 30 minutes to look back at my week and go, man, what did I do that I may regret? Because I want to clear it right now. I want to deal with it. And it's inevitable when you're moving quickly, you're going to make those mistakes. Now, I would say to you, it's very rare on a Friday that I got a flag that I got I think it's like a 3-alarm fire. It's very rare in my life today, but I still do. If I would have started that practice 20 years ago, I would have avoided a lot of brain damage. I would have avoided a lot of bad relationships, bad decision-making processes, and it would have saved me from a lot of grief. So yeah, the cars is just an anecdote to me doing that every week, man. I figure out who I'm going to hang out with every week and what I'm going to do every week. And I check that daily.
Do you take more time now to make decisions, or is it the power of saying no? Has that become a thing in your life? Because back then, I think as an entrepreneur, oftentimes, I can do that. Oh, sure. Sounds good.
Yeah. The power of saying no. I mean, so I didn't know anything about sales. And my first job was when I dropped out of law school, was becoming a salesman. And you can imagine, you look at my backstory and, mama's saying, oh, your son's going to one of the best law schools in Canada. Now he's going to sell door to door. The best training I ever had, that set me up to overcome everything from a transactional perspective was that sales training I had when I was in my mid-20s. It absolutely set me up for success. So it's a complex scenario.
Yeah. If your mom could see you right now, what would she be like, you think, if she was here today, before we end this conversation?
Well, listen,
everything you've achieved, everything you've grown as a man, you've grown. You have 2 beautiful daughters now. Imagine your mom around to see all this. Wow.
Well, you're trying to get me all misty-eyed here. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good question, my friend. I would tell you that my mom, the first thing she would look at is my girls. And she would know. I think she'd be blown away by what she sees I've done. I think she to the point where she couldn't equate it. She just couldn't equate it. Okay. But I think she'd look at Elena and Eve and, I think she'd be very proud of me.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Well, thanks, Frank, for this. I appreciate your time on this.
Yeah. Yeah. You got me all clamped, so now I'm trying to say something intelligent. So, listen, Zach, I appreciate the chance to talk to you, and anything you need or any kind of reach out, or if you want to have some fun down the road, let me know, and we could do a little back and forth on something provocative.
For sure, let's do it.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, appreciate it. Take care. Good luck.
Take care, Lynn. Yeah.
Thanks, Zach.